Welcome to another episode of Four Guys Talking About AI. I'm here with two of my buddies today. We got three of us. We got Greg Sterling and Neil Polachek. John Gerard wasn't available today. So what's up, guys? How's it going?
Good.
Another week.
Great. Another week at it. Big week in AI. So this week's episode is all about the tension that we're starting to see everywhere in AI. People are using it more than ever, but trusting it less than ever. On one side, AI is going mainstream in the real world, from fast food drive-thrus to local business discovery. And half of the consumers are already using AI tools regularly. But at the same time, surveys show that the majority of people don't trust the results that they're getting. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. Meanwhile, tools for knowledge workers are getting dramatically more powerful. Anthropic is going after this in a big way, and they just rolled out new design capabilities inside Claude, pushing AI beyond chat into something that actually helps you create, build, and execute work at a high level. So we'll talk a little bit about what Anthropic is doing and how it's different from what OpenAI and ChatGPT are doing. Very different strategies, different outcomes, and we'll get into that. It's fascinating, actually, I think, given where we are in the market. We're also seeing a shift in how people discover information. Greg's going to talk a little bit about a story that highlights something that we're all hearing more and more, is that people aren't just searching on Google anymore. They're finding people, ideas, and businesses directly through ChatGPT. Today's conversation is all about the gaps. AI is everywhere. Adoption is exploding, but trust and behavior and real-world outcomes are still catching up. So let's get into it. Our first story, so AI in the real world, consumer acceptance. Let's start where AI is actually showing up in everyday life. You may not realize it, but the next time you order a Blizzard at Dairy Queen or any of your other fast food restaurants that you go to, you could be talking to AI. And so the question here is AI here, or is it just, are people comfortable using it? What do you guys think?
I think that if, I know Greg mentioned that in the Taco Bell case, they went with that and then they backed away from it. Sometimes it's hard to communicate with somebody on the other end of that, order. And if it's able to disambiguate what I said, that might be a good thing, so that I get to the window and it has my latte with sweet and low or whatever I asked for, and my burger without any mustard or mayonnaise.
Your burger was sweet and low.
Yeah, well, but it's kind of why Domino's went to online ordering years ago, because that way there was no misinterpretation that pepperoni my peppers.
Right.
And it cut down on returns and all sorts of stuff. So I think it's kind of an interesting way to leverage that technology. The question is, will consumers agree with that?
I think you're totally correct that if it can deliver more accurate outcomes for people, they'll like it. In the Taco Bell case, I believe people were messing with the AI just to be obnoxious and passive aggressive, and so Taco Bell I kind of rolled that back. But I do think in situations where an AI can deliver a better result, whether that's the ordering kiosk or online or telephone customer service, it's going to be better for everybody. But there's a lot of backlash going on right now, so it's problematic. I mean, there was a Gartner survey that said earlier this year that was 1,500 U.S. adults, U.S. consumers, and the survey was from October 2025, so not a recent survey, but not a super recent survey, but last year Q4, I guess. It said the headline is half of consumers, 50%, say they would prefer to give their business to brands that do not use generative AI. Now, that's an abstract proposition. If people have a good experience in practice, it's going to be different. But in the abstract, people are expressing a lot of hostility to AI, and I think that's because of fear and because of all the sort of negative discussion about autonomous killing and job destruction and all of that. And there are clear areas in which AI can improve people's experiences, but will they go along with it in the short term is the question.
It's curious to me that as a user, we're using these things more and more, and I think people are probably getting some very good results out of it. But then there's this sort of undercurrent of distrusting of it at the same time. It's like we're on parallel paths, but not in alignment on those paths.
Well, I mean, as you may remember, in our survey that happened last year, in our survey was collected in late August, when we asked about local search and trust, and do you trust AI more? Do you trust Google more? Um, there was a disconnect between the usage and the trust. I mean, the responses we got were complicated, and I can't reproduce them here, but it is true that people are using these tools regardless of the sentiment that they may personally feel about them. I mean, I was talking to a friend who was citing the water issue. These data centers consume an enormous amount of water, and he was saying, I feel guilty using it because of all the environmental impact, but yet people still do because there are clear benefits. And I think that I think that like we use Google, but we're ambivalent about it. We use Meta, uh, social media sites, and we're ambivalent about them. I
Exactly.
mean, Meta is one of the slimiest companies on the planet Earth, and they are set to overtake Google as the largest ad revenue platform according to eMarketer projections this year. So
Wow.
we got a bunch of CMOs who are saying, yeah, we gotta use this because it's a great channel for us. But at the same time, all the litigation against them, all the revelations, all the 10 to 13% of the revenue comes from scams, ads tied into scams, really sleazy stuff. But yet everybody's still using it.
And those CMOs have to be there because their competitors are there.
Right.
I
And
mean,
because it
And also because
performs.
their customers are there. I mean, that's
Right.
the reality.
Exactly.
But here's
Exactly.
the thing, going back to the fast food kind of use case. I think it's really interesting that you have this 15% or so of people who say that they would never use it or they don't want to use it or whatever that profile is. But I tend to think that coupled with a good experience is a loyalty program that will supersede all of this stuff. And you give people an incentive to use it where it gives better results. And all you do is just give it your phone number and you start to rack up some points. Those points and the redemption of those points is way cheaper than staff, like front staff, taking your order and maybe screwing up your order and the returns and those kinds of things, and also the customer experience. But now you have a loyalty program. You're going to drive more business that comes with it. So you just give them your phone number at the beginning of the order, and
Exactly.
hey Greg, you want your usual today? You know,
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
like,
What if I could just do that? Here's my phone number. Yes, I'd like the usual plus add an extra fill in the blank.
exactly, exactly. So I tend to think that, you know, the smarter companies will start to embrace that kind of a thing, which is along the lines of, we've talked about this a lot, which is, the affirmation that you get with AI. That's a great idea, Neil. When,
right.
when you give it, when you ask it a question, and so
Nobody
it's like
else says that to me in my life.
it's a little bit of sugar that comes with the message. And so, when you're doing that and you tie a loyalty program into it, if I'm a, CMO at a fast food company, I'm definitely leaning into that because it's going to drive more business. It's going to, get people to come back. And if the experience is as good or better, um, you'll likely see revenue go up from the loyalty program. You'll have hard data that will show repeat visits of those people that maybe you weren't able to do with a human staff. And so, it's all very fascinating how those 15% of people right now in this moment in time may very well just convert over to, actually I like this because I get rewards.
I think an important point is transparency. And I think this is tricky for companies. If you say to somebody, hey, this is a new thing, we're trying this, we hope that you like it, give us your feedback. It may make mistakes, and you involve the customer
In that
kind of as a
journey.
part
Yeah.
as a partner. It's very different than if you just they
Push it
show
on 'em.
up and there's something different that and then they have to sort of suss out, is this AI? And then they
Yeah.
feel maybe a little deceived or something manipulated, you
But you
know?
can always have an escalation, where it says something on the screen, like if you want to talk to a human, say, I
Right.
want to talk to a human,
Ex
and
right.
and then that just like pings somebody in the restaurant or coffee place or wherever you are, and and then just that person can help you in that
That's
moment.
The
that's
other
your
thing,
segmentation strategy. Yeah,
if
go ahead,
that
Yeah.
Neil.
person who used to take the order at Dairy Queen can be actually working on an order, then that line is going to go faster, presumably.
That's the enlightened way to do it, but many employers will just cut that job.
Well, but nobody likes sitting in line taking the car fumes from the car in front of them, and
The
and
one
whatnot. So
the one who could really use that is In and
Star-
Out, you know.
In and Out, Starbucks, the ones that have
Well,
long lines.
Starbucks is doing something with AI. I don't remember. I didn't
Well,
pay close
and In and
attention.
Out lines that can be really long, and you
Yes.
know, um,
Right.
push them through. You know,
Right.
So moving on, here's is the story of trust. It's the trust gap. The tension is that people are using AI more than ever, but they don't trust it. There's new data that shows that the majority of Americans are interacting with AI tools regularly, but they're still questioning the accuracy and the reliability of what they get back. And that trust gap is becoming, a big issue. Case in point with this is that there was a Yelp survey conducted with a company called Morning Consult. It's 2,200 people, U.S. adults, and some of the key data points on this were that 65% of Americans have used AI search in the past 6 months. That's a media post stat. Whereas 57% of AI find local businesses at least monthly, according to a Yelp blog. So the translation of this is that it's not early adoption anymore. It's mass usage or getting there. However, trust is extremely low. 15% trust AI search a lot. Another media post stat. 63% say that they double check AI results. 51% describe AI results as a walled garden. And people are using AI, but they don't necessarily believe it. So, let's talk a little bit about, what's going on here. Greg, you wanna lead off with this one?
Sure. I mean, we have proprietary data kind of year over year on trust and AI, and we have seen some erosion of trust, but lots of people are using it. Our data show much more frequent usage than what the Morning Consult stuff showed.
Yeah.
But I think it's symptomatic. I mean, it definitely pertains to AI because people are uncertain about whether the machine is hallucinating or whether they can rely on the information. I mean, in my anecdotal travels in my own life, I don't see it as a big issue, but what a lot of people are doing is they're going from, and I did this actually, this is the notes from the field thing. They're going from a recommendation or discovery of a business in AI to Google or Yelp or somewhere else to see what the reviews say about that business. And that's a pattern we've identified in our data. But it's symptomatic. The distrust issue is not limited to AI. It's internet wide.
well,
I mean,
that's
I
what
think
I was
there's
going to say. Relative to
yeah.
what? Would they distrust it? How do they compare that to their trust of Google or of Yelp or of all these other tools and
Well,
platforms out there?
people are there's other survey data from a company called Bright Local, which does consumer review and local search surveys. And what they have found is that trust in reviews is, has eroded over time. And what people do is they'll look at a review on Google, which is the primary reviews site, and then they'll go somewhere else. They'll go to another site or, depending on what the category is. If it's travel, they might go to TripAdvisor or somewhere else. And if it's, you know, restaurants, they might go to Yelp or something, and they will look and see if there's a consensus. What do the reviews on Google say? What do the reviews on Yelp say? Because they're aware of things like review fraud and review manipulation, and so the distrust is. And Google doesn't have some massive trust advantage over AI. I mean, that's what our data show. People trust them more when it comes to local information based on the history of Google's performance, but it's not some blind trust that is without any skepticism. So I think it's a much broader question of trust. I mean, the whole internet now, there's just so many scams and so much fraud and so much disinformation
And
flowing around.
video now with,
Yep.
all the deep
Yep.
fake videos and all this stuff that,
Yep.
like, trust is, on the one hand, we're in a trust recession or whatever you call it, depression
Right.
even.
Depression.
It's not a recession anymore. We've officially crossed over. Uh, um, so trust really is the moat, is the thing here. And so when you look at some of these business drivers, you've got advertising, you've got hallucination that happens in this environment. Whereas you have, so you've got OpenAI, ChatGPT going in one direction with advertising. A lot of people complain about the hallucination problems that happen with that. Certainly, Claude has its own hallucination issues as well. However, the approaches to how they solve for this are different, and it touches back on what you just said earlier, Greg, which is Anthropic's methodology is really one of engaging the user and doing a solve it with me kind of an approach, where OpenAI is you ask it for something and it'll just do it for you. And those are two different paths that are really diverging right now in terms of how these platforms are uh, building products around their core technology, right? So, for example, the do it with me kind of method that Anthropic and Claude have is there's Claude Code, and then there's all these skills that you can add to Claude Code, for example, or Claude Cowork, right? And this idea is that you can plug in, you can connect your Gmail or your calendar or your Google Docs and whatever other tools that you can connect to Claude, and it will start doing things with you like an assistant. And they're really going after this, mid-market enterprise kind of business. Whereas OpenAI has just recently gone after and started to talk about how they're going to go after the enterprise market. And their whole methodology is you ask it for something and it'll just go ahead and do the whole thing for you. It won't involve you in the process. Whereas Claude will ask you some questions before it goes and spends the tokens on doing it. But they each have their limitations as well. I mean, with Claude, for example, even though you're paying a monthly fee, you time out. And that is a trust issue, I think. It happens to me all the time is that I pay my monthly fee where we pay a bunch with what we do. And it times out all the time. And it's very frustrating. And, the common refrain is like, you've run out of tokens for this session, check back in 3 hours and it's like I get put in the penalty box, and I'm a subscriber. I'm paying the money. It's not advertising based. So there are some trust issues with that as well. So each of these companies have some trust issues that they need to overcome. But I would say that Claude slash Anthropic is really leaning in more into privacy. They don't train their models on your data and your information, whereas OpenAI does. So there's trust issues with that as well. So each of these companies are having to deal with how they're going to solve for this trust kind of environment.
I think there is an opportunity in the same way that Apple kind of marketed privacy versus Android. I think there is an opportunity to market trust and to say things like, we won't train on your data. We're not going to store, all your information, or we're going to, you have more control over your information. And so there are a number of things that they can do to be more transparent and to instill trust. And that I think will create more brand appeal and more usage, all other things being equal.
But how do you really deliver that? Because I asked Claude how many companies are using trust in their marketing, and it says, comes back and says trust has become one of the most overused words in AI marketing. Okay? Major players are leaning heavily into
Well,
it.
that
So
becomes a problem if everybody's saying you can
right,
trust us.
they all
Yeah.
say that they're to be trusted.
Well,
What
that's a conclusion. That's a conclusion. What they can do is they can say, we do this, we don't do this. Talk about the
Right. They
particulars.
have to say what it is that what they're doing to be trusted, not just that they're
Yes.
trusted.
Yes.
Right. And
And
That's
they have
the
to reinforce that. They have to reinforce that as you're using it so that you realize in that moment, oh, this is a benefit
with
actually.
experiences, with real
Yes.
live experiences. And I think that's their challenge, is how to take the word trust and make it into something meaningful. Because right now it's just gobbledygook.
Right. I mean, and that's, not to sort of digress into Apple, but I mean, Apple has been very successful with that whole pitch around privacy, and they do have a significant advantage over Android and Google. Google and Android are essentially the same, but they're at risk of losing that with increasing their advertising and also with their Apple Intelligence. The system they've set up to improve to maintain privacy with servers and device processing and all this stuff is so complicated that it's just impossible to explain to consumers. So that's, I mean, you can establish trust, but it can also be eroded or diminished by subsequent actions that you take.
And to me, the biggest driver of trust is transparency. And how we're doing it, why we're doing it, here's what that means for you, all that stuff that says, hey, here's how we're doing it. You can look inside and see how we're making the sausage, right? We're going to take you into our factory and show you how we're making the sausage. Whatever that means in the context, that the notion of transparency is what drives trust up. And
it has to be reinforced along the way. I mean,
Totally.
You can't just like stand on your soapbox and say, trust
Yeah.
me. You have to
not-
build the trust, and then you have to
show.
highlight it.
Show, don't
them.
tell.
Right.
Exactly. That's exactly
Transparency.
right. So this is a good lead into our next story, which is, AI is becoming a knowledge worker tool. Consumers are figuring out whether to trust AI. Meanwhile, knowledge workers are already moving ahead. Tools like Claude are evolving from simple chat interfaces to actually tools that help you design, build, and execute work. And this is a big differentiator. In this moment, this is the reinforcement, is that when it says, trust me that I will, be your coworker and I'll be your assistant here. And then it delivers again and again, it delivers high quality results. And then also lets you know along the way, a little side note, we're not training on this data, or, would you like me to enable this skill to be able to help you out a little bit further because I see what you're doing as a real assistant. These tools are getting a lot smarter in terms of being able to be contextually aware. And as they are, being able to offer up value in that moment to the customer is that's a trust building exercise in that moment as well.
And I think the notion of trust and transparency is two-sided. Because if you recall, when I was talking 2 weeks ago on this show, I was talking about how I was using Claude to help me make some travel plans. And then I gave it access and permission to look at my emails and my calendar stuff. And, it went in there and said, hey, you have 2 reservations on the same date. You need to fix that. That's me trusting it, right?
That's a trust builder in that moment. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, is that
way, because I had to be trained. I couldn't say, hey, tell me, help me with planning this thing without, giving it access to my
Right.
email.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point. Sort of the more engaged you are, the more deeply engaged you are, the more the opportunities to build trust. That's an interesting kind of example.
Yeah. And for it to demonstrate that trust in that moment, and that's the reinforcement part that I'm talking about, is that, for you to kind of suspend your belief and say, okay, I'm going to trust, and I'll connect you to my Gmail or whatever. And you do, I mean, that's a big trust suspension of belief in that moment. And then you do that, and then it delivers you that kind of value that reinforces the relationship that you have. And that's the moat.
That's
That's
right.
a moat building kind of moment where you go, you know what? I like this. Nobody else has done that for me. I'm going to start using this more.
And in the course of, literally 2 or 3 weeks, I've moved almost all of my usage from OpenAI to Claude. From
There you go.
Except let me give you a little tip about Claude. If you're signing in using Google versus email versus Apple or whatever, you can only do that on your phone. Do not change the way that you sign in, because Claude will be confused and create a new account and start onboarding you. That's what happened to me yesterday. I had been signing in using Google. I was on a different browser. I thought I would use the same email address to sign in, and it's totally effed up the whole situation.
Oh no.
I cannot get into my account now, and I have to have them delete
because
it.
they're taking on, 3 or 4 million new customers every hour or something.
No. It's the way that the system is set up. They confuse even the same email address as a new user if you go in it a different way. So that's a little piece of practical advice
There we have it.
about Claude.
Speaking of notes from the field, let's shift into this a little bit. So, we're seeing this kind of stuff happen where people are going to ChatGPT or Claude or other tools, Perplexity maybe, could be Manus, could be other tools like that.
DeepSeek, Mistral in France, other tools in China, depending on where you are in the world.
When exactly? So, Greg, tell us your story about your discovery story of discovering this local business, and then
I went on this little vacation a couple of weeks ago to Mexico, which was very nice, and came back. And we have this is going to sound very extravagant, but it's a function of just how things have played out. We have four cars, and 2 of those cars are pretty old, at least 13 years old. I got a 20-year-old car and a 13-year-old car. The 13-year-old car is going to be my daughter's. I came back, and parts of that car were broken. Like, what happened in my absence? And I used ChatGPT to diagnose the problems. One problem was a little side mirror adjuster, and then another problem was the headliner, which is the fabric kind of and foam material that's at the top of the car and the interior of the car. That had come loose and was sagging down. And so I took a picture of that with ChatGPT, and I said, "Tell me about this, and how do I fix it, or what are the options?" I ultimately got some local business listings of people who could fix it. And I went to Google and Yelp and checked out the businesses that ChatGPT had given me. I didn't go to Google first. I didn't go to other resources first. And today the guy showed up at my house. He has a mobile shop. And he was also the cheapest, and he did the job. And, I said to him, "Do you want to know how I found you?" Because I always ask local service providers that question. And he didn't seem that interested, but nonetheless, I told him, and then he told me a lot of my customers now say they find me on ChatGPT. And, I did a whole analysis of the different competing businesses, and I said, do an evaluation of the reviews and other things. And this guy was really highly rated. And then when because he was a mobile guy, and then when I said, here are the different prices I got, they said, "This is the guy you have to go with. Choose this guy." And so I did. And he's done the work, and hopefully it's all worked out. He's been doing it while I've been on this call, and so hopefully he hasn't stolen the car and driven away with it.
He's driving it off to the shop.
It's a 2013 VW Golf. I'm sure he doesn't want it.
Oh, no,
But nonetheless, yeah, it's a good car. Nonetheless, this guy said to me, anecdotally, he's hearing from a lot of customers that this is how they're finding him. And it's really interesting. And he's not necessarily doing anything. He has reviews on Yelp and reviews on Google. So he's doing that kind of stuff, but it's getting picked up in ChatGPT. And ChatGPT was the primary tool I used to find him. And it all worked out really well.
Well, they're definitely, bolstering up their local listings, local information quite a bit recently. I know that they've been building maps and other capabilities into the results.
And now you can use your device's precise location. So if you have an iPhone, you can turn that on, and the ChatGPT results get better with that.
Interesting. Well, we're gonna put a pin in it for today here. We'll get to the Allbirds story next week because I think it's really fascinating. So we'll leave that as a cliffhanger for today. But thanks everybody for listening. Great conversation, guys. Thank you.
All right. Have a good week, everybody.
Have a good one. Thank you. Bye-bye.